What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with another video, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, looking at the opening weekend for Marvel Disney's The Eternals, or rather just Eternals. It's always hard to not put the on there. It just seems natural to say so. And also, we'll be talking about the third weekend for Dune, which saw a pretty respectable 51% drop, though as I've been making in comments in previous videos about Dune, it is just not looking like financial profitability is in the cards for it, even though it has been greenlit for a sequel. So we'll talk about that, and also how No Time to Die is actually doing a little bit better internationally and is chugging along a lot more so than a film that probably should, that has been now out for a good 5 weeks or so. But before going any further into this, please make sure that you smash that like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So of course the big news of this weekend is The Eternals, right? And again, I'm going to keep on saying The Eternals because it just seems natural to do so. Eternals came in with a whopping $71 million, which makes it the lowest grossing opening weekend for an MCU film in 2021, losing to films like Shang-Chi, losing to films like Black Widow. Lowest grossing MCU film. There aren't any other MCU films set to come out this year that will be anywhere close to, or seem to be anywhere close to, having this kind of a number. So Eternals is the loser when it comes to that. Of course, there's multiple factors to take into account here. Of course, the fact that it is a 2.5 hour plus movie. It is introducing 10 brand new characters that no one's ever heard of. But on the flip side of that, where Shang-Chi really had no star power whatsoever as far as bringing in certain people that could get the attentions of some American audiences, when it came to the casting for Eternals, you did have some recognizable names from people, from characters from Game of Thrones, right? So American audiences would have recognized them. You also had people like Salma Hayek in there, Angelina Jolie. Again, not obviously people that I would consider to be major stars, but hey, at least name recognition, whereas with Shang-Chi, the biggest name that you had that was being really put around was Awkwafina. And I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, there really isn't a whole lot of stuff there. That film, however, was able to direct itself towards the Asian marketplace in America, was able to go do well over $200 million domestically, which is what led to that film being financially profitable, in addition to costing $50 million less than this film Eternals. This does not have the same type of audience, and as we can see already, based on its performance, is not doing as well as that film. And what will make it even worse for Eternals is that it's going to very quickly fall behind where Shang-Chi is and was at the same time, because Shang-Chi also had the benefit of opening up during a holiday weekend, and so it got an extra bump from the Monday numbers, pushing it to around $85-90 million for the 4-day total. But comparing to 3-day totals here, Eternals coming in last for 2021. We also had, again, the third weekend of Dune, which saw $7.6 million added on there, 51% drop. Very respectable for the fact that this is competing against itself on HBO Max. It does show that there are absolutely a lot of people out there who are going to support this film in theaters. Most of the HBO Max releases have really just died off after the first and second weekend. They just disappear completely, whether it's films like Suicide Squad, whether it's films like Reminiscence. They just don't really do anything because of them competing against themselves. So I do think that the fact that it's performing as well as it is with the HBO Max factor is definitely something worth commending. However, the film is still around $83.9 million, still gonna have a little bit of a ways to go to maybe reach $100 million domestically. It is really not going to do much anywhere as far and do that much more internationally, where this weekend it added another, 20 or so million, $20 to $23 million internationally, because it's already been out internationally for a long period of time. So really not a whole lot of money left there for Dune. So Dune, as I've been saying for a while, is likely to be a box office failure. That being said, it has been greenlit for a sequel. The only thing that this could potentially impact, though, is how much money they are willing to put behind the film. Obviously, Legendary, more likely to put in more money behind the film, being, of course, one of the Chinese-owned companies, whereas Warner Brothers might maybe not be willing to put as much money up if they don't see as much return on the investment. They do have a deal for that second Dune, for Dune Part 2, to be theatrically exclusive, and so that very well could give them some confidence that, hey, if the film's doing this well, competing against itself on HBO Max, maybe this is an indication that a Part 2 would do even better if it was just theatrically exclusive. But again, I do think that the profitability of a film still definitely has a role to play there. No Time to Die coming in with another 20% drop. Again, it's seeing very small drops week to week, and this is very important because it means that the legs on this film have been actually very impressive. The opening weekend was not very impressive, was one of the weaker ones of the big budget films to come out this year, but because it's had such low drop-offs, it's actually been able to make up some ground because of that. It's still making $6.1 million, being 5 weeks out, still out at over 3,000 screens, whereas there's other films that have been out for an even shorter amount of time that are already starting to drop screens like crazy and seeing much more massive drop-offs. Venom: Let There Be Carnage, another film that is also seeing some pretty good showing there. It is going to cross the $200 million mark by the end of next weekend in its 7th week of release. And so, again, kudos to Sony for being able to make a short film that was able to bring enough people out to bring some profitability to that actual film. Going into the worldwide numbers, Eternals coming in at $161.7 million. And so you're going to see this a lot from the mainstream media press, of that this film has overperformed because they were all saying it's going to make $150 million worldwide. And obviously 161 is a lot better than that. But they were also saying very early on that they thought the film was going to make somewhere between $78 and $88 million. There were some early projections that it was going to make over $100 million domestically. Not going to be the case here. It did do better internationally than what they had expected it to do. And that's the reason why it has gotten to the point of being $161.7 million. Now, as I mentioned, what's going to be interesting about this film is, one, obviously how this compares to the other MCU films to be released during pandemic times, and two, what it does in its second weekend, because, as I mentioned in a previous video on my own channel, 93% of the international market has been opened with this film. So this is a movie that's not going to get a delayed release in a lot of territories. And so whatever numbers we get next weekend and whatever kind of drop-offs that we see, the normal projections that I'm able to make about whether a film's going to make or lose money will be pretty darn accurate, right? Unless this film just has insanely good legs, which even some people in the media are starting to question about whether or not the film's going to have that. We're going to be able to have a pretty good idea because of the fact that it's not getting any type of delayed release. As you can see, internationally from South Korea, $2.6 million, 1.6 from France, and obviously these are not numbers that are up to date because the numbers always does fall a little bit behind. Sometimes people get too caught up in the numbers that they see here saying, wait a minute, why is it saying that it's only got this much money here, but then the total doesn't quite match up? One of the reasons why is because they tend to, again, the numbers being run by a few people, is not always going to get the complete numbers updated exactly where it needs to. It'll get the actual official projections, put that number out there, right, the total number out there, and then over the course of time, they'll then update those individual numbers as they come out. When it comes to Dune, as I had mentioned before, right, the film was around $290 million last weekend. So between last weekend and this weekend, it's gained about $40 million. So that's both the day-to-day numbers domestically, internationally, and obviously, of course, this past weekend. And so hopefully you can kind of now see why this film is slowing down internationally enough. Again, $246.5 million internationally is a pretty decent showing there. However, $83.9 million after 3 weeks domestically still puts this film in a position where it might be able to break the $100 million, but even if it does, you're still looking at a film that's going to be at $346, maybe get to $400 million. This is a movie that needs to make around $412 million to break even. So it is definitely within the realm of possibility. They're definitely getting a little bit closer, but it needs to do a little bit better than this. And the question is, where is the money going to be coming from in order for that to happen. It's not going to really come from the domestic market because that number has been, though having smaller drop-offs than other films, still is dropping off because of the HBO Max factor. And as far as internationally, it just doesn't have much where else to open where it hasn't already been out for about a month or so. That being said, this is a film that has gone to the point where, based on Blu-ray and 4K sales, you could still very well see the film make profit on the back end because of things like that, even if the original box office run is not as successful as that. I did mention No Time to Die as well. Now at $667 million. As I said, I think this film is doing a lot better than what initial indications did, especially based off of the opening weekend. Remember, this film domestically only opened up to $55 million, which is just not good. It's a movie that needs to make $750 million worldwide to break even, again, based on certain and current estimates. So you can totally see that film is kind of in the mix of getting at least close enough to be able to maybe make it up with Blu-ray 4K sales down the line. It's doing a lot better again, I think, that a lot of other people would have expected, and it has gotten to the point where it's either right at the peak of projections that I had for this film, but it also, again, was a little bit tricky because of delayed releases. Speaking of my box office charting, yes, we got shots. We got some shots here. Let's go ahead and blow this up a little bit. So you can see for Eternals coming in at $161 million. Again, it's what they expected the film to make, but $200 million budget, $300 million when you add in typical marketing costs. These are, again, pretty conservative estimates. The break-even number for this film is $500 million. Based on the current number right now, it is negative $212 million. So it still needs to make up $200 million. And remember, it only gets 60% of the end box office. Now, it won't have to worry about the China number kind of, propping it up because it's not getting released in China at this point. And obviously that can sometimes throw some questions into the mix there, but still has a lot of work to do. We'll see what that second weekend is going to say. And again, that's going to be a pretty big impact. As you can see from No Time to Die, $49 million in the red, so still very much off from profitability. However, as you can see, based on the first 2 weeks, it is around 50%, meaning the legs of this film have actually been incredibly strong. It's basically doubled what it made in its first 2 weeks. So this is, again, a very impressive feat for this or any film for that matter. And so because of that, the chance of profitability is definitely out there. Again, it's at negative $49 million. The lowest, the best case scenario that I had in my projections was negative 44. I would say it's definitely going to be able to make it past this number. The question is, though, how close to break even is the film going to get? And that really could, really could be anyone's guess. When it comes to Dune, as I said, $412.5 million is the break even number for Dune. Right now, it's at $330 million. So, again, only still negative $50 million or so in the red for that movie. Still technically has a few weeks left to really be able to try and bring in the numbers to get it even close to it. If it can at least get that number, that negative number, to closer to negative 20 or 25, that to me puts it in that territory of being able to make that up later on with 4K sales, Blu-ray sales, any type of video on demand sales too. But until it gets to that point, we can at least say that I'm still very confident that it will end up still being in that red territory because, as I mentioned, not only is that just based on the numbers that have been reported and the numbers that we have, but we also cannot forget about the fact that films have been delayed and we don't know what type of extra marketing cost that is going to add on top to it. And obviously that means that the break-even number ends up actually being a little bit higher. So usually if a film is able to surpass that and make a decent amount on top of that, we're able to say, okay, it's made enough to, probably make up for any of those extra costs that could have come down the line. But when you're getting very close to this number, obviously we're looking at a situation where I still think in the end it's not going to make any money. But of course, The Eternals is the big movie this weekend, $161.7 million. As we've said before, still very much a movie that has a lot of ground to be able to make up. One of the best ways of us really seeing this is by comparing it to two other MCU films that have come out during the pandemic. So for Friday, it actually lost to Black Widow. Black Widow also, remember, came out on Disney Plus at the same time. Black Widow was able to beat it, $39 million on its first Friday, and Eternals barely beat out Shang-Chi. First Saturday, it won barely by about $1 million or so. The Sunday number is the one that was the most impressive for Shang-Chi because obviously it had the aid of having the next Monday after off, having that holiday Labor Day weekend number there, and so it was able to win and dominate that Sunday number. But as you can see, Shang-Chi in its 3-day opening, $75 million compared to the $80 million for Black Widow, $71 for Eternals, so it is the lowest opening weekend MCU film to come out this year. And the question is going to be is how low does this number end up? Because Shang-Chi, again, was able to, with the holiday weekend, get to the point after that first Monday of getting to $94 million, breaking $100 million by that Tuesday. Eternals is not really in the position to get to that point. And the first Wednesday of Black Widow, it was able to break $100 million. Will it be able to even get to that point? Something tells me that this film won't break $100 million until next weekend. And even then, depending on what kind of drop-off that we get, could be a very bad sign for this film and could potentially indicate a pretty massive loss for this film. Right now, the worldwide box office is the only thing showing any sort of interest in this film, as domestically, not really doing all that well in comparison. But what are your thoughts about these numbers? Are you surprised that a film like The Eternals is not doing as well in the domestic marketplace? Personally, I am not all that surprised by it. It is, again, doing relatively well in the international marketplace, and I'm sure that if you read a lot of different blogs, they'll say it's tracking this much percent ahead of this film in this market or in this series of markets, but in the end, all that matters is what the actual total is, because even if it's overperforming internationally, if it's underperforming or performing right around where they thought it was going to be domestically, and it drops off tremendously in either of those camps, it spells trouble. Shang-Chi was able to do a lot of money domestically, not as much internationally. We will probably end up seeing Eternals do a lot more internationally, but not as much domestically. And the difference, of course, being the production budget being $50 million more for Eternals means this film, in all likelihood, will end up being a massive box office flop. But I will not be able to say that with any sense of conviction until we get those week 2 numbers and we get that drop-off, that international drop-off. Again, if we're seeing this film getting close to $300+ million after its second weekend, okay, then we'll be able to have a little bit of a discussion there. If we're seeing this film just getting to 250, 275, all right, there might be a bit of trouble there. But again, I'll have a full breakdown of that next weekend. But what are your thoughts? Do you think Eternals is going to be able to get to the $500 million that it needs to break even? Also, do you think that, and I did mention it, right, do you think that No Time to Die, right, that the James Bond film is able to reach the $750 million it needs to break even? Again, it's still somehow making more money than I think anyone would have expected it to. It's definitely going to surpass my own projections, though I will remind people that my projections were indeed based off of some mixed math because of its mixed release and delayed release. And so, again, I don't have the full confidence in the projections that I had for that specific film in comparison to other films like Last Night in Soho or Antlers or Halloween Kills, which had a more traditional opening. But obviously, these are all questions that are worth asking. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.